Now, I'm not even talking about the history of the Bible and what Christian belief is, mainstream or otherwise. I'm talking about what secular academia accepts. I'm talking about the same secular academia that was pro-Da Vinci Code. Even the Da Vinci Code didn't try to say Jesus never existed. Give me a break. Okay, so let's move on here. My third little claim here is he provides zero evidence of formal education in classical or ancient history. And so finally, my point on this is anyone who has studied Albert Pike knows that the Masonic plan is to destroy all religions, and finally atheism as well, and then bring in the one-world Luciferian religion, which I believe ultimately will be the whole starseed conspiracy. But more on that later. Albert Pike here, born August 15th, 1871. I want to read a letter from Pike to Mazzini. This is well known here. He says, "We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm which, in all its horror, will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, the origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. Then, everywhere the citizens forced to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization and the multitude disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will form direction and leadership, anxious for an ideal, but without knowledge where to render its adoration, will receive the pure light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out into public view, a manifestation which will result from a general reactionary movement which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time." Enough evidence for you folks? Alright, my third point, the uncontested evidence. I want to go over the uncontested evidence against Alan Watts' slanderous and libelous claims about the historicity of Jesus and the Israelites. Included here is basically an actual quote in this analysis by Tacitus in the Annals of Rome. All right, and this is Book 15, Section 44 here in the Annals of Tacitus. This is unchallenged, undisputed history. Okay, folks. Okay, so Tacitus says, to dispel the rumor, Nero substituted as culprits and treated with the most extreme punishments some people, popularly known as Christians, whose disgraceful activities were notorious. The originator of that name, Christus, which is Latin, basically from where we get Christ, had been executed when Tiberius was emperor by order of the procurator Pontius Pilate, he says Pontius Pilatus. But the deadly cult, though checked for a time, was now breaking out again, not only in Judea, the birthplace of this evil, but even throughout Rome, where all the nasty and disgusting ideas from all over the world pour in and find a ready following. And I'm sure that's what Alan Watt thinks of those who actually believe in the actual historical record that Jesus existed, and especially those who are Christians, that we are nasty and disgusting, at least in our minds. Now, I want to share a very brief email from Dr. Paul L. Meyer. That's spelled M-A-I-E-R, and you can check him out on the web. Dr. Paul L. Meyer is an expert in classical and ancient history, and he was basically responsible for an important translation of the Church History by Eusebius. And you can get the book Church History that was translated by Dr. Meyer and read it for yourself about the history of the early church. And he actually responded to an email I sent to him, and I wanted to ask him about non-Christian sources about the ancient Israelites, because I'm trying to be intellectually honest here and say, okay, for the secular folks who don't want to read the Bible, what is in the actual historical record by non-Israelite peoples about the Israelites? Were they celestial beings that were made up by the elite? Well, let's see what Dr. Meyer says. He says, "Hello, Jeff. You're right about, quote, no one knows history anymore, unquote. This is simply tragic, and it leads to the imbecility of those who say there were not 12 tribes of Israel, or that Moses never existed. All such people do is to parade out their total ignorance for all to see, and you can tell them that a professor of ancient history told you that. Exclamation point. All surrounding countries in the ancient world mention the Israelites. In Egypt, the Merneptah stela boasts, quote, Israel, his seed is wasted, unquote, meaning they conquered them. They are also cited by Herodotus Herodotus was considered, by the way, the father of ancient history, of ancient secular history. I'll continue with his email here. He says, in all subsequent ancient classical authors, to the east, not only the Assyrian references, but the famous Cyrus Cylinder records how he permitted the Jews to return to Babylon, from Babylon to Jerusalem, in total parallel to the biblical record, and so forth and so on. All the best, Paul L. Meyer. And by the way, you can check out the Merneptah Stela yourself. It's spelled M-E-R-N-E-P-T-A-H. And there's a Wikipedia entry on it, and it's basically undeniable evidence that during the reign of Amenhotep III, the peoples that were conquered by him were listed on this stela, and one of those peoples were the Israelites. All right, so there you go. There's the hardcore proof, and I challenge Alan Watt to come out and try and challenge this with any of his so-called proof, if he even has any. Apparently he doesn't, because he's too afraid to answer my questions. Now, my fourth little point here is I sent 2 different emails ahead of time to Alan at the address on his website, trying to give him a chance, because I don't know this guy. I wanted to give him a chance to clarify his statements before I confronted him on the air. And so I basically read him about Tacitus, and I also gave him a quote to Beit Shalom Ministries and also to tectonics.org, J.P. Holdings site, and that's spelled TEKTONICS.org. And he refutes all of the occultic authors of the 18th and 19th centuries that said the same sort of thing that Alan Watt is saying now, that Jesus really is an invention or a copy from older sources, and that in fact all of this religious dogma and nonsense, according to them, is all basically esoteric and symbological or symbolic of the heavenly bodies, the zodiac, if you will. And so finally, we get to my last point here, a formal request here to all of these so-called truth media, truth movement, 9/11 truth movement hosts, to help expose this fraud artist who calls himself Alan Watt. So I urge all of these leaders who care about the truth to systematically expose utter enemies of the truth, such as Alan Watt, whose popularity on the internet, along with Michael Tessarian, has been really taking off lately. Even if you're not Christian, and this is my last point here, even if you're not a Christian, if you let people stifle free speech that you hate, they will soon stifle your own speech. And that's all I have to say. God bless you all.